with the winter too deep in and this weather is way too freezing, changing my winter wear ended up being a must. Might not look like the fact that I got winter wear, I'm fine. We are talking about winter wear that I got over 10 years, easily 15, and it's actually past its to-wear stage. So this will not be a simple, straightforward sewing for me either, since the person that made this particular pajama set that I'm replacing was my grandmother, who the day before posting this video, it was her 4-year anniversary since her passing. Luckily for me, I did inherit the fabric that she bought, basically at the same shop, heavy and lace, and all her patterns, which means not only do I got the fabric that she actually used and buys to make these pajamas, I got a pattern too. Although I would have loved to go to her to actually sew basically my first winter PJs as her helping me as a transitional piece, I'm about 4 years too late, or actually 6 years if we are counting COVID. But before we can get started on how I'm gonna make my PJs, let's have a closer look at my grandmother's version. Clearly I was still growing in this set because of where the trousers have to sit to be full length, and according to the pattern it's waist height and it sits on my hips. And on top of that, the amount of ease I have is far too much ease to my liking. So let's get started. So to be able to get started, I need to have my clear picture. I want to reduce the amount of ease I've got. Before I started with drafting the pattern or getting the pattern ready to be pinned to the fabric, I chose the fabric I wanted to do from my inherited fabric stash. I washed it probably in the past because at the moment I'm only hand washing all my clothes, since I don't want my clothes to come out visually worse than when it went in. Then on the line it goes, and then while I wait, it's pattern drafting time. And thanks to Evelyn Wood that already recommended sewing based on the final garment's measurements instead of the starting one to choose the actual pattern I want to use, I'm doing just that, deciding the amount of ease I want and going for that size, which makes it 2 sizes smaller than what I am to start with. Because my grandmother did actually use these patterns, I do have some searching to do between 3 envelopes. Not too bad compared to how it could have been. Getting the correct measurements and right size that I'm going to use, I started to trace it. And I have discovered while I'm more leaning towards how Bianca of the Closet Historian chooses to do her patterns. That tissue paper is not my friend. I'm half tearing the tissue paper, half drawing on the tissue paper while copying this piece. As soon as I managed to trace everything out, I altered it to fit me. Then once I got that pattern piece done, or the altering of my patterns, I made sure I copied that for how many times the pattern said times what, or do a mirror reflection to mimic how the fabric would be if it said cut on the fold. Once I've done with that, I can continue on with checking if the fabric is the correct size, and then from there, and if you want to follow my exact method of doing it, good luck, because I'm not taking any responsibility for the next section. Have your pattern pieces be on the table where there's pipework in the ceiling, where you end up having, I'm not going to say a pipe burst, but the wonderful unwanted leak that basically end up forcing your paper to be fully wet and soaking. We have to put it out in the sun to dry and hope and pray the wind doesn't blow it into the swimming pool. We will have to put it back on the table with tons of weight on, just to go back and actually try to trace it all out once more. Yeah. Now, if you want to follow this remaining or the proper thing, just keep the pipe bursting, pipe leaking part, please. And we'll continue. Dry. I placed all my pattern pieces on the fabric. And here is why I actually prefer to have each and every pattern be a ×1 and not cut on the fold or ×2. I can play around with where and how I can place my pattern pieces to maximize fabric usage. And on this particular case, I need to go back into my fabric stash and to look for alternative fabric. I found a bunch, or at least 3 or 4 different types of fabric, washed it and put it on the line. Unfortunately, if I look back at how my grandmother used to work, what she actually was currently working on the time of her passing, she actually made clothing for one of my cousins who had a child who my grandmother worked on making stuff. So the amount of fabric I got is not enough for a full set. I don't have a problem with this. I will wear a mixed match winter PJ since it's only there to be able to sleep in and stay warm during the winter. It's not for parading around in the street. So I took the one that is the closest to it is red as what I could, because my first piece was red fabric. If I did my math correctly according to the pattern I used, I needed about 3 meters. According to my method of squeezing as much pattern pieces in as little fabric as possible, I only needed 2.5 meters, not 3. What does that tell you? I would have wasted 0.5 meters worth of fabric. After I chosen how I'll mix match my pattern pieces, I went and I cut out, trying to save as much as the usable bit as I can. For a cat's bed that Huntress is demanding I make a plan for her. It's the theme of the winter's sewing session. Oh, it's warm, it's my bed, thank you very much, and it's not hers to keep. So I need to keep her in mind for my fabric usage and cut out. That is why you'll find I leave as much of a space as I physically can untouched. With the pattern pieces cut out, I turn to sewing. What do I sew first? I started with the top because the top would be the most confusing and complex between the top and the bottom. Starting with my shoulder seams, I pinned my shoulder seams together, sewed my 1.5 centimeter seam allowance according to the pattern, cut down one side and do a flat fell seam. Because I want to get to wearing these PJs as quickly as possible, I took shortcuts where it was possible. So pinning the flat fell seam part down before sewing became a non-important task, which I could skip. From the shoulder seams to the sleeve seams, or attaching the sleeves to the rest of the bodice. And somehow I got the direction wrong of how I need to sew it. It is fine, like I said, it's just to stay warm in the night while I sleep. Not for me to parade in the streets to show off this garment set. Joining the sleeves to the bodice was the same. Pin the sleeves to the armhole, sew the two pieces together, cut down one side and sew the flat fell seam. From here it is pin the sleeve and the side seams together, sew it, cut down a piece or the one seam to be able to do a flat fell seam. Before you want to tell me, but it's physically impossible to do a flat fell seam on a tube that doesn't have enough space on, you need patience. And you haven't discovered yet? I do have it, because who in their right mind would take the time to redraft or try and save as much as their hard work as they can after a pipe that's leaked and end up getting your hard work wet and forcing you to redo it? So slowly but surely, wrangling it under the foot, moving it up to the wrist, sewing down to the through from the cuff side straight to the hip height or hip area of your top. Sew it slowly. You'll start and stop constantly once you start sewing. From there, just attach the ribbing, which will all follow the same, because I got 4 areas: the 2 cuffs, ribbing part, the one at the lower band, and the neck hole. They all follow the same procedure. Pin and stretch the ribbing fabric to your actual top, making sure it is equally stretched out across the area where you need to sew. Then sew it completely without cutting anything down. Turn the cuffs so that you can top stitch on the other side, making sure you pin it all roughly at the same area, that it's equally spread out, and then sew it down. Once that is done, we move on to the bottom. Starting at the inseam, it is to pin it together, sew it, and then cut the one side down and sew your flat fell seam. Again, I didn't pin it because I'm trying to save as much time as I could. From there, it is to do the crotch seam. Pin it, sew it, and then cut down the one side and flat fell it. If you manage to see pins at this point, my brain wasn't working fully, so I made a mistake by pinning it as if it was a skirt. But I do correct that in the end. Like I said, side seams next. I pinned it incorrectly, so it was undone to finish the crotch seam and repinned correctly. Sew it down, and again, although it's easier, shimmy that entire thing under the foot. I start at the feet, sewing to the waist. It takes patience and going slow, but I actually prefer to hand sew these types of seams. But it's a challenge to myself to only machine sew it so that I can leave it as a fully, for my next PJ set, as a fully hand sewn one, to show it can be done by hand as well. Once all the seams are done, it is to sew the cuffs together and flat fell those seams. Slight habit at this point, but a wrong one to have, actually, as I have discovered as I sewed the two ribbon fabric pieces attached to the legs. Where it's pin it, sew it, fold and flip the ribbon so that you can top stitch it down. With all that, it leaves me with one thing left, and a panic and stress level that is rising, and that is the waist. I went and cut my elastic 5 centimeters shorter than my actual waist measurement, and then I overlapped it slightly, just the width of the foot, and actually sew it together. Normally I'll do a zigzag stitch, but unfortunately I had to pause and quickly read it, my sewing needles, the sewing machine's needle timing to be able to sew. And no, before you tell me, I need to run to a sewing machine or place that do a sewing machine service to get it done there, because it's such a impossible to do. One, tell that to the 20-year-old me that tried her best to keep sewing and was forced to learn how to do basic sewing machine maintenance or a decent sewing machine maintenance just to be able to sew when she had zero money to spend. So now it's, if I can quickly do it myself, where I know I don't need somebody to tell me my machine needs to go in for a service, I'll just do it quickly myself, because we are talking about a 20-minute waiting and a slight struggle compared to half a day to 2-3 weeks of waiting in the middle of the winter while I'm freezing at night, even though I'm sleeping under 5 blankets. My 20-minute slightly struggling to get the tension correctly sounds to me to a better plan, because I'm focused on getting my winter wear done. I don't want to freeze when I'm used to 5 to 8 degrees ice cold mornings, to where I'm now dealing with, is tonight the night that we're going -1, or are we staying in the positives as to how cold it gets? So I'm not used to going under 5 degrees, and we are under 5 degrees. So my winter wear must get done. I'm not wasting time to send it away. With the sewing machine up and running again, I just stitch it and then sewing the waistband over the elastic, or fold the top bit over to be able to do a waistband. Once I'm done with that, it is time to get my panic and stress levels down by showering and getting dressed for bed, and do my very first fitting of how the garment fits. Yes, folks, I have finished sewing an entire garment without fitting it, starting to stress if it's not fitting me well enough, because I'm not a fan of using commercially made patterns. But luckily for me, it fits. And it fits the way I want it to. Closer to the body, meaning I'm staying a bit warm. It's less air between me and the fabric to warm up, which means I stay a lot quicker, tastier than what I used to be. But this leaves me with a slight problem before I can continue on with the remaining winter wardrobe. Huntress's demand for a bed of herself. So that will be, in 2 weeks' time's video, hopefully? But it's definitely the next video I'll be showing you.